Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host for this evening, along with fellow executive board members Jennifer Falsing and Beth Sturry. In the Zoom room, we'd like to welcome all of you. If you're a first-time Adoption Happy Hour attendee, we like to know that as well. So please feel free to use that chat bar and let us know, give us a shout out. And if you haven't already, also use the chat bar to let us know what state or country you're from and how you identify in the adoption constellation. So before we get started, we've got a couple of announcements.
I don't have a headset.
Yes, if you'd please place yourselves on mute if you haven't done so already. It's a reminder. This is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. Portions of this event are recorded and may be shared on our private Happy Hour group or Facebook and our YouTube channel. So if you don't follow us on Adoption Happy Hour Facebook group, please do so, because that's where their replay, our guest replay, will be later on. Again, please remain on mute, raise your virtual hand. We will stop the recording about 8 o'clock and then open it up to questions, okay? But you're welcome to use the chat bar in the interim. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thoughts, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988. What else do we have? Okay, who's talking about support groups? Beth?
I will go ahead. This is our regular programming at a glance for you. Happy Hour is the first and the third Friday of each month. And then most weeks of the month, we have something going on. So the second Thursday, which this time is, I believe it's the 9th next week, will be First Families, facilitated by Amy Seek and Amber Jimerson, and Birth Parents Journeying Together. That is what that support group is about. And then on the 14th of November, we will have Putting Yourself Back Together After Reunion with Dr. Joyce Pavo McGuire, and Lost and Found, and then what? We talk about all things reunion related. And then normally on the fourth Thursday of the month, Danielle Gaudette hosts Self-Love Essentials for the Adoption Constellation. Now, the fourth Thursday this month is Thanksgiving. So it will not be that day. There's a possibility of it being the next week, but we will have that information out for sure to you very soon. So those are our regular programs. And we think it's great that most every week you can find us somewhere in a Zoom program. And that is all I have.
Okay, no other announcements. Okay, thank you so much, Beth. I appreciate that. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I am really excited to introduce you to these three amazing ladies this evening. I know all of you, I believe, but Kelsey. I've met all of you, but Kelsey. But I'm really excited because Sarah, Kelsey, and Lori have done this amazing collaboration and written this book called Adoption Unfiltered. And this is points of view from across the spectrum. And I really, it falls near and dear to my heart, because that's what NAAP's all about, is the entire constellation and how we learn and grow from one another, and how we can change future adoption in the future. So this book that's getting ready to be launched very soon in December, the first part of December, they're on this, starting this amazing book tour. So we're so honored to have you three ladies with us this evening on Adoption Happy Hour, and welcome.
Thank you, Marcie. Thank you for that, for getting what we're doing, and for having us here for Happy Hour. This makes me really happy.
Well, it's glad to have you back. You know, you've been on before in our early days.
Yeah, it's been a while though, because I think that was before the name change. That was still Indiana.
Yes, before the name change.
Network. Yeah, so I appreciate it, and we're just so glad to be here. It is exactly what you're all about, and You know,
Yeah.
we appreciate the NAAP programming so much, and this is one of our very first events, so we're just delighted that it's here in this community. It makes perfect sense. So thank you again.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
I think I've got screen sharing privileges, so we do have a few slides. Is everyone seeing that? Okay, good. Okay. So yeah, so here we are. So I think we'll start by we'll each introduce. We know a lot of you. I see a lot of faces and names that I know, but some of you that are new to me. So we'll just start and tell you a little bit about each of us, who we are. As Marcie mentioned, we're an adoptee, a birth parent, and an adoptive parent working together. We are different ages and stages of our lives and in adoption. Kelsey is a millennial. I represent Gen X, and Lori represents the boomers. And so there's that. I am an adoptee. I'm the author of books and essays, including my memoir, Searching for Mom, and Adoption Unfiltered that Marcie mentioned is due out December 1st. I'm also the founder of the Adoptee Voices writing groups, and I'm a trained course facilitator with the Neufeld Institute, which really informs my understanding of adoption and what adoptees need and all children need when you look at the lens of attachment and child development. Okay, Kelsey, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sorry, there's a 3-year-old, almost 3-year-old next to me complaining about her dinner. So sorry if that's distracting. I'm KELSEY VANDER VLIET RANYARD. I'm a birth mom. I'm also the 4th generation in my family consecutively to relinquish a child for adoption. And so in many ways, I think that has felt like a family curse a little bit. But I think that my experience with relinquishment has kind of guided our family in a lot of ways to start opening our eyes to some of the effects that we've all experienced as a result of all of the family separation. And I'm originally from Northern Indiana and Elkhart, Indiana. I know that this group was originally an Indiana-based group, so people might actually know where Elkhart is in this group. And I placed a child for adoption in 2016, so really not that long ago. But ever since then, I've been fully entrenched in adoption advocacy, reform advocacy specifically. And a lot of that has come from my experience working in the field, working in agencies and law firms, and seeing the landscape both in the Midwest, on the East Coast, as well as the West Coast. And that's where I'm at now. I'm in Northern California. I've worked in adoption policy and advocacy now for 3 years in just the policy space. And it's been a really interesting journey as a birth mom, trying to advocate for reform, but I know that so many have walked that path before me and have made that an easier path for me to walk as well. So yeah, I'm the co-author of Adoption Unfiltered, and I'm a co-host of a podcast, Twisted Sisterhood. And so yeah, that's me. Lori.
Hi, Kelsey and Sarah. I hardly ever see you anymore. Just kidding. My name is Lori Holden. I'm the adoptive parent part of this triangle that we have here in our authoring group. I'm coming in from Denver, Colorado. I am the mom to 2 20-something children. Children is not the right word. I can't really call them my adoptees, so I'll just say my adult children. So I've been through the arc of active parenting and learned a lot along the way. I've been able to see the things that I did well in parenting and well in adoptive parenting, and see the things that maybe not so much and I wish I'd known more or just been better prepared for things. So through a collaboration with my daughter's birth mom, about 10 years ago, I published a book called The Open-Hearted Way to Open Adoption. That was what I knew then. I've spent the last several years talking more with adoptees and birth parents and attachment professionals and people who know stuff for my podcast, Adoption the Long View. And then it's all kind of culminating in this collaboration with Sarah and Kelsey to bring together the Venn diagram of the three main players in the adoption constellation, and help us understand ourselves and be understood by others. So that's what brings me here.
Okay, so yeah, so we have this unique working configuration between us, much like a lot of you do at NAAP, where we've done a fair bit of things together. We first wrote an article for Severance magazine together. We did all the work that goes into bringing a book to market, 3 years of work for that, right? Not only bringing it to market, but writing the thing. And as part of that, weekly meetings, getting together every week and doing these working sessions. And then out of that arose a podcast. We were like, we should start recording our presentation, these meetings. There's things we're talking about that are beyond just the work we're doing. And so then we just kind of started doing a podcast together, Adoption Unfiltered, and then lots of speaking together. So just a brief timeline. And the takeaway here is the graphic looks like a roller coaster because it has been. It's been 3 years of lots of ups and downs. Starting with meeting, Lori and I first met when she came to one of my launch events for my memoir, and we had an in-person introduction for the first time. And then shortly thereafter, I guess within that year, Lori took some heat in, you all probably know this space can get a little bit contentious from time to time. And Lori had taken some heat for something, and it's gone what it was, but I remember reaching out to Lori just to check in and say, how are you doing? And, we kind of ended up in this conversation saying, like, why is it so contentious and why is it so hard to work together? And we just had this kind of funny, very flip conversation of, we should write a book together. Like we should write a book. And then we found ourselves a few months later at a conference together, the Wake Influencer Forum, and Lori and I were there. We saw Kelsey presenting, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, we got to talk to her. Let's write this book with her." And she didn't even know us. She said yes, and the next thing you know, we're meeting weekly. We're still meeting weekly. Now we're meeting practically daily. To get this thing going. So all that to say, lots of wonderful things have come out of that. So what we thought we would share with you all tonight is just some high level results of our journey together, our working together. The things that, we're writing a book about attachment, and we're attaching to each other. We're building this authentic and true, like really wonderful relationship together, working relationship, and then, personal friendship as well. And really, what really set the stage for that is the way we came into the space together, is that we each came to this work in different ways. We each felt passion in different ways. And then there was this evolution of coming together and bringing our different gifts and our different insights that came out of that. So we're going to share all of that with you really quick, not to make this a sales thing, but we will tell you about the book so that you have that as a backdrop, because definitely the book has been our biggest endeavor, or the biggest mountain to climb out of the things that we have done together. And this, I think, will give you an understanding of the journey that we've been on together, at the same time as telling you a little bit about the book too, since it's not available just yet. But the premise that we had is that adoption has always been filtered by those in power, especially kind of out in the mainstream. So adoption professionals, adoptive parents, and the media have for a long time kept kind of this filtered perspective of adoption, that, I think we all know that it has been pretty one-sided and kind of glosses over a lot of the things that can be hard about it. And that's not to say that it's all hard, but it's that there hasn't been room for fully expressing the hard parts. And of course, that makes it hard to feel the joys too. So we decided to get past the filters by listening to each other and listening to others, people who are living it, so that we could just share what adoption's really like for those living in it. I'll preface everything by saying that we structured the book in 4 parts. So we're playing off the title. We have Adoptees Unfiltered, Birth Parents Unfiltered, Adoptive Parents Unfiltered, and then our last section is a collaborative section called Healing and Hope, and healing and hope for on an individual level as well as on a systemic level. From the inception and with all of the work we do, we aim to be adoptee-led and adoptee-centered. So we really tried, this chart shows you just how we went about pulling in all of the people. We know we're 3 white women and we are not a monolith. None of us are a monolith. So it's trying to, what we really wanted to do was really show the breadth and depth of our community. And so we went out and did 50 qualitative interviews from others in the constellation, some not even in the constellation, some people who decided not to adopt, but making an effort to definitely center viewpoints of those who've been historically marginalized. So first and foremost, adoptees, and then as a close second, birth parents. So diversity in race, diversity in age, identifying gender, type of adoption, open or closed, domestic, intercountry, same race or interracial, private adoption, foster care adoption, agency adoption, a range of adoption experiences, whether people perceive them as good or not as good, lots of different perspectives on adoption, ranging from the abolitionists to people who think it's wonderful. And then religious and non-religious viewpoints, and lots of different religious viewpoints of where they were. So this just is a snippet of some of the things that were important to just call out, at least, or we tried to call out. 27 adoptees. Out of those, 23 were the adoptees that I interviewed. We had several in dual roles. And Kelsey interviewed 18 birth parents, and Lori interviewed 9 adoptive parents. And you can get to, maybe do you want to speak to that a little bit, Lori, before I move on?
Yeah, I think the allies part of our subtitle of our book includes some of the people that I interviewed that don't fit into any of the 3 main corners, and that would be a couple of people who thought they were going to adopt, researched it, and figured out they wouldn't for various reasons, and what that means in a culture of pronatalism. I think we kind of need to look at that if we're looking at why it's so hard for people in infertility to just not adopt. You know, just adopt is so big, but what about just don't adopt? So we cover that, and then also adoption competent therapists, attachment people who are well versed in attachment theory. So those are some of the allies that we also filled in with.
Okay, so just three quick points to make. As I already mentioned, this one, just our primary goal is first and foremost centering adoptees, since we're the central figures around which adoption revolves. And then as we were writing, just kind of determining, 50 interviews was a lot. And then, when you go through a research project, you realize you just want to spend there. Where do you stop the research? And how do you tell the stories? And each person we interviewed could have had their own memoir, could have had, and some of them do, some of them, they are working on those. But what we realized is the point wasn't for us to share their complete stories. That's for them to do. We don't want to talk over anyone, but we wanted to offer psychoeducation and that's supported by the personal stories. So and in this ultimate goal of sharing the larger story of adoption, for me, it was really desiring to explain the ways adoptees are so often misunderstood, and often for sure by those around us, and often even by ourselves. And, you know, I grew up, until I really started studying attachment and child development, I grew up really thinking something was definitely really wrong with me for what, once I found attachment, studies their human attachment dynamics, and nothing was wrong with me. I was reacting like anyone does in the face of separation. So that's really the challenge. And then that was really the challenge, you know, for the other two sections too. And what we set out to do is to explain ourselves to our own groups, and then also to the other groups. Kelsey and Lori, would you add anything to that? Okay, I'll keep going. And then the third point is just that really heavily researched and informed by attachment-based science, child development and separation trauma. Lots of different experts, I can't name them all, but Dr. Gordon Neufeld, Dr. Gabor Mate, Dr. Jaron Kim, Bruce Perry, Nadine Harris Burke, lots of Brad Reedy, lots of experts who we also wove in throughout. So that's high level, very high level about the book. And then you know, what I want to do now is just shift a little bit and tell you, you know, just about the fruit, basically, what, you know, we're so excited to share with you here in our community is just what we learned, and how we grew from this collaboration. And the first thing I'll say is just, may seem obvious, but working across adoption roles requires a lot of vulnerability, to step out of those silos. You know, it can be really vulnerable for adoptees. I guess I'll start, and then I want Kelsey and Lori to share too. But if you've been hurt by people in your own constellation, or if you've encountered any hurtful things by others in the constellation, you're really putting yourself out there, you know, and taking a risk in a lot of ways. And there's you know, an ongoing challenge to be open and take risks, and not to project any of your past experiences onto your professional working colleagues. And just, you know, the need to really develop a lot of trust. You know, we're writing from really private areas as we go through. You know, you write separately, as all writers have to do at some point, and then you come together and you're putting up for first feedback others in the constellation. And so there's a lot of vulnerability in that, and that's just something that we wanted to highlight. Kelsey, how about you?
Yeah, I think in the writing process for me, being vulnerable was more than just kind of like bearing your soul, but it posed a risk of like reliving some of the most traumatic moments that you experienced, and that you remember so poignantly. And so it wasn't necessarily an ambiguous loss. It was very striking memory in my brain, and to sit down and write about it was took vulnerability, but it also required me to, at times, depending on what the topic was, kind of like enter a depressive state. And so it was a risk, because I'm a parent, I have a daughter to take care of, I'm married, I have a job. You know, you don't know how long you could potentially be out for if you start to go down a path and open up a box. So but then in our dynamic as a group working together, I think it required me to kind of get over myself a little bit, and overcome imposter syndrome. There was a time where I approached Sarah and Lori and said, like, I don't really know what else there is to talk about for me, because it felt, as a birth parent, I know so many of you feel very much on the outside looking in. I'm not in the home every day with my child while he's being raised by his adoptive parents. I'm not living and breathing adoption every single day in the same way an adoptee would, or in the way that an adoptive parent does as they're, you know, raising a child who's living and breathing it every day. So it felt sort of like I didn't really need to be here at times. But through our relationship that we were building, the three of us, I was reminded that my role was important and that the responsibility to give, to highlight the voices of so many different birth moms was extremely necessary. So, Lori?
Yeah, I just want to be explicit in saying that when the three of us came together, it was not like we were good friends who had a lot of trust coins in our bank accounts with each other. We were acquaintances at best, and to achieve what we wanted to achieve with this book, which kind of came out as we worked together, we really had to drop the stuff that keeps us able to face the world. You know, when you're online, when you're in front of a group, you have your armor up to keep yourself protected from being so vulnerable. But with the three of us in our working sessions, we really did need to drop that armor. And it was okay to do with these two people for me, because they were able to see me, the warts as well as the good parts, and still accept me. And, you know, I think this is a theme I hear from adoptees too, is to really be seen for who you are, even the ugly parts. So yes, I think if you do decide, you know, through this work, through NAAP, if you decide to start talking to other people who are not in your corner of the constellation, it does require some vulnerability, because you're trying to develop these permeable membranes where good things can get through, but the bad things don't get through. So, but you have to make yourself vulnerable if you want to be open and if you want to learn something that you don't already know.
Well said, Lori. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the second one, and that is that, okay, our book is called Adoption Unfiltered, but we have learned filters are still important. It doesn't have to be totally naked. You know, when it comes to being a caring and respectful member of a community, then sometimes those filters still need to stay in place, especially when power dynamics are at play. So I think, you know, silos are important for support too. And in silos, you can often tell it like it is without the filters. I'm really thankful that I have a lot of communities. We're adoptee only communities and spaces, and I'm really thankful for this space too. But you know, it is different. There is a different, there is a filtering that just automatically happens and is needed to stay in relationship sometimes. Kelsey?
Yeah, I think that the unfiltering was necessary for the parties that have historically been spoken for and have had a filter over their story without their permission, if that makes sense. But the filters, but I think, I don't remember if SARA or Lori has said it, but we filter for compassion, but not for truth. So, and we want to remain respectful and aware of potential triggers that, you know, in the way we present things to people, but we, in no way does that mean that we start lying to each other about what our experience is, or, you know, how it feels. And so, yeah, Lori.
Yeah, I'll give everybody an inside scoop of the writing process here, for me anyway, about trying to find the appropriate filter. I had written a chapter to help adoptive parents understand themselves and to help other people who weren't adoptive parents understand adoptive parents. And I called it baby fever. And baby fever is the phenomenon that many of us know about, where especially if an adoptive parent is coming from infertility, the main questions are what are my chances of getting a baby fast, and how long is it going to take, and how much is it going to cost? And when we shift from infertility to adoption, we don't realize that those two questions remain, even though we've entered a whole new realm where those questions are now wholly inappropriate, because there are other people involved. So baby fever makes you myopic. It makes you not be able to see the error of your ways. And so I wrote this section that I thought was going to be so helpful for adoptive parents to identify within themselves and then come out on the other side with much more wisdom and awareness of themselves. But through some early readers who were not adoptive parents, it turned out that even just that chapter title, Baby Fever, was way too triggering, way too unfiltered. And people couldn't actually keep the book in their hand, which is not a good thing for an author to do. So we had to backtrack. And I, with the help, I have deep gratitude because I had the support of my colleagues to reconfigure that section in a way that was more accessible, more readable, and perhaps a teeny bit more filtered for all audiences. So yes, filters are important.
Okay. Third one, power dynamics are always at play. And they're everywhere. And so we had to pay attention to that. And then I think I'm just going to kind of do the next one hand in hand. Adoption dynamics are always at play too. So I think, just back to the power dynamics, I think, it's definitely something that we had to be mindful of in our relationship of adoption dynamics and power dynamics and how that was affecting our relationship. Kelsey, I see you're parenting right now, so I might just give me when you're ready. But Kelsey has written a lot about power dynamics, so I'll have her talk about that. But there's definitely a lot of remembering, how those power dynamics come to play. So I think one thing right off the bat I'll share is that, and maybe Lori, you can chime in on this too, but our agent ended up coming in through Lori. And so did our publisher ultimately. And so Lori is the adoptive parent, that there was a power there, that she was sharing. She was sharing her because she already had the relationship built, and that's so much of getting book deals is relationships. But so she had that, and she was sharing her power and kept having to ensure that things were balanced, because early on things would just have her name on it. Contracts would only have Lori's name, and other official documents that she kept having to say, no, not only that, and put Sarah and Kelsey first. And so there was kind of a constant kind of reckoning of the inherent power there. Lori, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, just to continue on that, as we are starting our trying to reach mainstream media and doing some other things, my name gets put first, even though everything we put out has Sarah's name first, my name last, Kelsey's name second. It's like everybody automatically sees the three of us with me as the adult in the room, even despite our best efforts to show it another way. So that's the power dynamics are so out there, and we are very gently trying to educate people. No, this is how our book looks. Sarah's name is first, Kelsey's name is second, my name is third.
I wrote pretty much a whole chapter that examined the power dynamics from a birth mom perspective. And one of the scariest things I think for me while writing this book was writing about the power dynamics in an open adoption while I'm in an open adoption, because anything I say, can and will be used against you. And I'm, going to be under a magnifying glass and scrutinized, I'm sure. I do have a good relationship and good communication with my child's adoptive parents, but that, we're on shaky ground, I think, the way that we structure adoption. And so anything at any point, a birth parent's worst fear is to have the rug pulled out from underneath you. So that was a fear of mine when writing about power dynamics, and it's a fear of mine too when with this with the book release date looming. So but I think it was a really important conversation to have, especially talking about how when we sign consents to terminate our legal rights to being a parent. People see that as kind of like a just erasure of all of our rights and responsibilities, and legally it is, but there's such an emotional aspect there that's very important to incorporate. And we can't allow that to happen if people are holding their power with such a tight grip, and that doesn't serve the child. So
you. Back to the adoption dynamics always at play. We have a lot of fun stories about this. I have to say, it's kind of fun to just, when we notice it now, I mean, we kind of just analyze it for ourselves. Like, oh my gosh, like we just did, it's adoption again. I think we could talk to those too. But I will just say our working styles definitely reflect our roles. I know I'm not alone. I know there are a lot of adoptees who, because of adoption, I think we just kind of have a core belief that we're interchangeable or we're replaceable. And so early on in the project, even though I was kind of driving a lot of it, I was offering to Lori and Kelsey, like, if you need to replace me, like if you'd rather have a different adoptee, like, like it was just kind of like, you know, this thought of, you know, I'm replaceable. And then you would say like, no, we like, you can't. And I'm like, oh, okay. But just that's just where my brain wants to go. I think also I operate unconsciously believing that I might get swept away at any time. So and this goes for any professional work or collaboration, I'm always documenting, because I'm always worried, like if I go away, I want the project to carry on. I don't want it to stop because I could be gone at any minute. And then just an unconscious desire, you know, that adoptee, I'm not good enough, or the unconscious need to prove my worth. I think that I definitely felt that a lot in this project. And I always have perfectionism a little bit in my way when I'm writing. And I have to kind of just, you know, shake it off and do all kinds of mental tricks to just get drafts down and not worry what it looks like when it's coming out. But this book in particular, it felt a little different because the perfectionism that came up was really wanting to do right by my community, by the people who I really care deeply about, who I interviewed, and then my adoptee community, who I really care deeply about too, and wanting to do right by them and have them feel like I've represented them well. I think just one other thing, I think this is a kind of just for some color, but we were working on a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and we were collaborating on Google Slides, like we do a lot of, we have so many tools for collaborating, but Google Slides that day. And we were fervently working on something, and I was typing something, and right below my line, Lori was typing something that was very similar, and I got super triggered. I shouldn't say super triggered, but enough triggered that I didn't know what was going on, and I had to like say, I'll be back. I just knew I just had to go. I was super like this low hum of agitation. And reflecting later, I was like, oh, I felt like the adoptive parent was talking over me. It felt like there's the adoptive parent talking over me. And so it was fun to like, you know, it's actually really fun to see these things later, because it's like, oh yeah. and see how that goes. I mean, because of course, adoptive parents have held the mic for so long. And so that is a really sensitive place for me. So I think I'll let the two of you share your experiences of adoption dynamics at play for us.
I think just the main thing for me is really I guess in the midst of our project, sometimes just feeling like I'm better in the background, or trying not to get in the way or overstep. And I think sometimes that was a huge birth parent theme of just, you know, let me know when you need me. I'll be over here in the corner. But I think that Lori and Sarah really did a lot to like bring me in closer, and genuinely valued my experience and my opinions and perspective. And so I don't think that was a permanent theme, but it definitely was in the beginning.
I'm not an adoptee, full stop. I am the oldest child, and I've carried through my whole life the need to be good enough. And so, you know, going through infertility and, you know, having God himself, God itself telling you're not good enough to contribute to the gene pool, that's a blow to an adoptive parent. Then you go through the home study, which is proving that you're good. You have to be super confident that you're good. And so there's this steroid thing about being good for adoptive parents. And this is part of introducing adoptive parents to themselves and then explaining us to others. Once we've been through that kind of a situation, not everybody comes to it through infertility, but what I did bring into the adoption dynamics, I think, among the three of us was, am I doing it good enough? Am I leading when I should lead? Am I following when I should follow? Am I attuning to both of my partners well enough? Am I giving them what they need in this moment? I was really almost hyper alert with being good enough. I don't know if some of that is adoption dynamics and the whole home study process and just needing to prove yourself, like to show the world you can do something before you've actually done it or not. But that was one way that I saw my insecurity as a human raise its head.
Okay. We also wanted to talk about how reaching across the aisles helps out in other areas. So I will just say for me, as an adoptee, I find it such a gift to have relationships that can handle hard things. And that can hold even after going through hard, these tests. I think that has helped us professionally in so many ways. And, I think for adoptees, I think a lot of our people pleasing tendencies tend to come from this place of thinking, okay, if I don't say the hard thing, that means I'll keep the people close to me close. And we have to say a lot of hard things in our working together, because we're writing a book together and we want it to represent our complete audience. There's so many audiences for it, and so we have to say, I don't know if this is working, or I think this could be stronger, or I don't know if this is coming across like you meant it to. And we're having, we notice these adoption dynamics, and, I really appreciate that Lori, when I told her that's what happened, we were like, oh my gosh, and we're sensitive to it. Like we learn she's not defensive. She's not fragile. She's not upset with me, but we can just learn and grow from it. So there's something that's really beautiful about having that framework, and learning from it and taking that out into other areas.
I think for me, just being able to understand each other working together, but also to be able to be understood. And then as you're working towards a project like this, you get to benefit from all the research that your colleagues are doing. And so for me, having being a birth mom to a 7-year-old, and being able to observe Sarah's writing process and doing research for things like the effects of stress in utero and stuff like that. These are resources and information that I'm really grateful to have had only 7 years in, when it's taken some people 20, 30, 40 plus years, or sometimes never, have the ability to obtain. And so, and then just throughout this process, I feel like I've come a long way in my own adoption and my own understanding of myself, just from talking to an adoptee that is, been through it and is out of adolescence, is out of young adulthood, and is has such a vast understanding of herself, and an adoptive parent who has walked the walk 20 plus years. And so I think it was really beneficial to be able to witness their experiences and the experiences of the people that they interviewed, and see it all kind of get stitched together. So
It's so affirming for me to hear both Sarah and Kelsey say those things, because I think one of the things we all set out to do was to humanize each other. You know, when we're out in the online adoption world, there's a lot of dehumanizing that can go on, and to help us all be seen as humans, fallible humans who have, you know, reasons behind our stupid behavior. And if we can see ourselves in that, maybe we can change that stupid behavior. I think one of the things that's really helped me reaching across the aisle, besides this book, in working with Sarah, is her research with the people she interviewed, and her knowledge through her attachment work has helped me to understand things that I had seen in my children previously, and see even today, and might see in the future. It helped humanize all of that behavior that I see. Same with Kelsey. Over the years, I've been involved with 4 different birth parents, all very different. Sometimes with baffling behaviors as well. I was baffled by certain things, but reading Kelsey's section and working alongside Kelsey has helped me help humanize everything. And I think if we can all see each other as fallible humans, then through this book, we will have accomplished a lot of what we set out to do.
Hearing you both speak reminds me of another kind of area, and that is, you know, there's so much, there's sometimes a low hum of grief if you pay attention. I think I feel it a little less now, but when you're working in a configuration with other birth parents who may be farther along in their processing, and other adoptive parents who are farther along in their processing, there's a little bit of sadness and loss of like wanting it for your own constellation, but there's also a lot of healing there too. And I have really found that with Kelsey and with Lori, you know, and it helps me with understanding and forgiving, and you know, seeing that humanness that you were just talking about, Lori, not just in the 3 of us, but outside, in my own personal world, and then outside in the greater world too, when I'm interacting with others. So I just, yeah, and we're having a little love fest here.
I just want to shout out to NAAP also for this whole thing is about humanizing each other, right? So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And our last point is just that there's just a really long arc of adoption, and you know, that's true for each of us, know that as individuals, but then it's also true for us collectively too. For you know, there's a long arc of adoption history, and then a long arc of adoption advocacy and adoption work, and you know, how it's evolved over decades and then generations, not just the ones we've been a part of, but as others have experienced it. So you know, I think there's this kind of knowing whose shoulders we're standing upon, and you know, what torch we're taking and what turn in the relay race. There's that component of it, and you know, knowing what's happening today. We mentioned the generational perspectives that we each come from, and I think that that's been helpful too. I mean, my adoption took place at the tail end of the baby scoop era, and Lori's experience coming to adoption came place right when open adoption was coming. And Kelsey has a fresher perspective of adoption that's closer to placement, and then a lot of knowledge of just adoption, how it works from the policy level, and knowledge. So all that to say that just kind of taking the past and the present and the future is really important to us, and in just seeing that long arc and the long journey that adoption in America is on. Kelsey, I'd love to hear from you, and then Kelsey has some exciting things to share of some cutting news that just happened recently.
yeah. Yeah, so I'm trying to, I think I'm blanking out a little bit on where I went with this slide. But I think one of the things I tried to do with my interviewees with the birth moms, the 18 birth moms that I interviewed, was show their arc. I wrote in my introduction to my section that the media and society cares about two stories when it comes to birth parents. A, when they are in the hospital relinquishing their child, and B, 25 years later or more when they are in reunion. And nobody cares about the time in between, but the time in between is formative and important. And so and it's formative and important if we believe that these are humans that matter. And so, and which I firmly do, and I know that everybody here probably does as well. And so recognizing that long arc was kind of recognizing an individual arc, but also a community arc, because we had women that placed 5 years ago that were interviewed, women that placed 30 years ago, and each of their stories was powerful, and it showcased different eras of adoption and how it was practiced, and it highlighted some of the very real pain points that we are still experiencing in new ways with the integration of the internet into how we practice adoption. And then the big news, sorry, Hallie, put that down, please. The big news is that today, Congresswoman Custer of New Hampshire, Congressman Lamborn from Colorado, and Congressman Adderholt from Alabama all co-sponsored and they've introduced the Adoption Deserves Oversight, Protection, and Transparency Act, which is a piece of legislation, a federal legislation that my team at Ethical Family Building has worked on for 3 years. So finally, and right before we got on this meeting, somebody delivered champagne to my door. So I'm staring at it right now. But it's been a long 3 years of like developing this legislation and pitching it to different members of Congress and getting different groups' eyes on the legislation. And that includes adoptee groups. We have 2 major endorsements from adoptee groups in the country, birth parent groups, adoption attorneys, adoption agencies, and looking at all of those names on there, some of those groups hate each other very much knew who else was endorsing when they chose to make an endorsement. And to see all of their names together in collaboration, it was huge. And I guess I haven't told you what this bill does. This legislation prohibits unlicensed adoption intermediaries, like facilitators and people that they don't have a license to provide any kind of services. They don't have prerequisite educational requirements like social work or law. They don't have any oversight or regulation like an agency would or like an attorney would. So you can't report them to anybody when they scam you or exploit you and break the law. And so these are entities and individuals that very heavily advertise on Google and Facebook. They offer services for very high dollar costs, and they essentially broker the adoptions of children. And this legislation will prohibit them from providing services in interstate cases, because that is the extent of what a federal law can do in this scenario. And then it will also prohibit them from advertising. And so it's called the Adopt Act. And so that's the news. And I'm hoping to tie it all back to this slide. I'm hoping that it contributes in a very positive way to the long arc of adoption. And I'm hoping that someday we can look back and say, thank God that happened, and look how far we've come now. So, Lori.
Yeah, I just had to use my little Zoom clap to clap for you. And maybe the rest of you wanted, or some of you want to do that too, because Kelsey, I know how long you've worked on this. And it so ties in with what I wanted to say about the long arc of adoption, the long arc of adoption practices. that go back about 100 years to Georgia Tann, and that this is called the Adopt Act, and the T in the Adopt Act means transparency, and that we are trying to bring you with your efforts are trying to bring transparency, and with our book we're trying to bring transparency. That's what true openness has to do with, is it's open, you can see, we're clear on things. So yeah, the long arc, it's 100-year arc of that.
Hey, so that concludes what we wanted to share with you. We would love to hear questions, and just see all of your faces. So I'm going to stop sharing and open it up.
Yes, thank you so much, ladies. And we'll go ahead now and stop the recorded portion of tonight's program.